Hi, my name is Michelle Ribeiro, and I am the CIO of SpiritSec, a Brazilian cybersecurity company. Before I start, let me appreciate all the work done by the organizers, hosts, other speakers, and of course, our sponsors. It's an honor to me to be speaking at DevSecOps, and I hope you enjoy our time together. Okay, a little bit about me. I work with Linux and open source security technologies since 1999, supporting governments and other organizations to adopt the latest uh, security technologies. I have been involved with the Debian Project and the DevOps Days community as well. I have a B site where I advise technologies. I advise governments about technologies and international security as well. Okay, enough about me. What is our agenda for the next minutes? Well, first, let's talk about our goal here. My main goal for this talk is to simplify your journey into DevSecOps so you can get early and significant results to your organization using open source tools to secure your development pipeline. Our agenda is the following. He will start, of course, defining what is DevSecOps. Then he will talk about how to introduce security into DevOps culture. And lastly, how to secure DevOps methodologies and technologies using open source tools. Okay, so to better understand what DevSecOps is, you have to first revise how he used to handle security before the DevOps movement. So in the age of the Waterfall Security and the Waterfall development as well, he introduces a series of sequential processes to get your code out into the world. From a security standpoint of view, he acts like gatekeepers with our role isolated to the final stages of the development. He used to schedule a security audit to revise the application code, but only after everything was done, when the developers believed that their work was fully completed. He graded this code against a series of requirements in a predefined and static list. After days or weeks, a PDF with hundreds of pages that almost no one read went to the first to the C-levels executives, and took another pair of weeks to reach the developers and operators to revise the code and make the necessary adjustments. Not only the company lost time and money by not separating the secure code from the unapproved one, but he failed to deploy the required changes. Or sometimes the code and the application went into production and anyway, and we know where this finished, right? With DevOps, he could ensure faster development cycles, but our security practices remain very outdated. So, and this can undo even the most agile in his DevOps initiatives, right? I'm sure almost everyone has experienced a successful deploy that is affected by the rules of the web application firewall. And at the same time, here in the area of automated threats that require automated response. There is some studies that say that 58% of the web traffic comes from human and 22% comes from bad bots. And this number is only expected to change. So one of the main challenges for InfoSec pros are to bring their game from a reactive one to a proactive security. You need to integrate security into our pipelines from end to end. You need to decentralize and automate vulnerability assessments and give developers fast feedback so they can feel empowered and have the necessary training to make security assessment and fix the vulnerabilities that they find as faster as possible. Okay, so he understands the problem that he have, and he now understands what kind of solution he would need. And how DevSecOps is the answer to all that. I really like the way that Sneak, the CIO guy, defined DevSecOps. His explanation is the following. Oh, sorry. If DevOps is composed of DevOps culture, methodologies, and technologies, so DevSecOps should mean to introduce security into DevOps culture, to secure DevOps methodologies and tools. Quite simple, right? Okay, but how? And if you are a DevOps leader, I really strongly advise you to give a special attention to the concept of CI/CD, because this is something difficult for InfoSec pros to understand. So keep in mind that continuous feedback, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and maybe how can I say that in English? Maybe it's a virtual concept for us. So help us by making your construct our own pipeline. This will be great for us. Okay, what else? The concept of shared ownership. This is so important. And this is a number that I like, and almost every security manager loves as well. There is some research that say that for any team of DevOps, you have 100 devs, 10 ops, and just one security professional. This is a war that we are losing, guys. So it's good to have more soldiers on board, right? So think about who assumes security responsibilities for across all the teams. Do the teams received security educations, guidelines, and policies? They feel responsible and empowered to take security, to make security assessments. Ideally, developers should be familiar with the fundamentals of security concepts, such as least privilege, cryptography, data security, and privacy. And the InfoSec pros are one of the best guys to talk about this. So create programs when the teams can work together, transferring knowledge between them. Creating and sharing mechanisms or tools to ensure security of your applications and platforms, it's a great way to do it. You can create libraries and authentication and encryption service directories, for example. With everything available and easily searchable, it's easier for developers and operators to reuse this secure code and the security scripts. You can create standard images with the most used systems, such as Apache and databases, for example. And when possible, try to use DevOps tools to handle security issues. Most of the companies that are in between that didn't adopt DevSecOps, still they are using DevOps for security and for developers and operators, but the security issues are handled in a different software. What you can do is to open issues in your GitLab or GitHub for security security vulnerabilities as well. And this is a great concept called shift left. John Willis, a long time ago, no, not so long, talked that when you build, you secure. So the developers have to be comfortable and to manage the security of their own code. And how can you do that? You introduce security scans into the developers floor, into the pipeline, enable them to find and fix these vulnerabilities before the code leave their hands. Ensure constant feedback. The concept of shift left is the most important one of this talk, because this is the context that we remove, that will stop InfoSec pros from being seen as the bottleneck of innovation. How does this work in theory? When you have a pipeline and all the steps are successful, the direction of the pipeline is to the right? But when something fails, you do what we call shift left. You stop the build and you create an issue into your repository, your issue management, such as GitHub or GitLab, and you create something, an issue to your developers. So this is the concept of shift left. You return the code to the one that built it. So as John Willis said, you construct it, you secure it. Yeah, you build, you secure it, right? And this is great because different layers of security are created, and reducing the costs of innovation and accelerating the process of change, because you create a differentiation between secure code and the unapproved one. Okay, you have 100 lines of coding and just 10% of it wasn't approved. Okay, you have 9% of the change into your build. The 10% can wait for tomorrow. So, and this will reduce the costs of your development. Okay, so here you see standard DevSecOps pipeline with most of the more used. Well, this can be updated, and here you see name of some of the software that are most used right now with into DevSecOps. And before I go forward, let me talk about something that most of people don't keep in mind, but it's very interesting. When you are InfoSec Pro and working with DevOps team, try to use your post-mortem skills, because here used to disasters, right? Sadly. So one of the culture, one of the things into the DevOps culture is to work with post-mortem in a more agile and faster way. But InfoSec pros are really good into post-mortem, and this is something that you can use to get on board, to feel as part of the team. Okay, now enough about theory. Now we are going to talk about action. And this is where I really like. This is where I really like because, as you see, my English is not so good, but to talk about action is something that that goes smooth, I hope. Okay, how to secure DevOps methodologies and technologies. First, let's take a step back and remember that what is DevOps methodologies and technologies. The giant DevOps movement, they brought into the market a whole new mix of concepts such as microservices, APIs, CI/CD, containers, clusters, private, public, and multi-cloud. Of course, no DevOps culture, no DevOps environment is equal to another with different culture and, of course, different tooling as well, especially considering the amount of options available. If you include only the Cloud Native Foundations options here, you have more than 1,300 projects. It's virtually impossible to be a DevSecOps engineer and talk and say that you are able to secure all these projects, right? To illustrate what I'm talking about, almost everyone knows this figure. It's very popular on the internet. When you search for DevOps tools, this is the image that Google shows you. And if you expand your search a little bit more, you see these options and the Cloud Native Foundations list that I was talking about. So to make our journey simpler, as I promised in the beginning of this talk, let's concentrate ourselves into the Cloud Native Security for Cs: code, container, cluster, and cloud. This is another nice takeaway from my talk, I hope. Okay, let's start by code. But before you go, but before I start talking about code, let's, as you can see in the figure, each one of the C's depend on the security of the squares in which they fit. So, for example, your code is as secure as your container, and your container and your code is secure as your cluster, and your code, container, and clusters is as secure as your cloud, be it private, public, or multi-cloud. So, remember, if you just have a code security strategy, you are not secured because you have more treaties to concern yourself. Okay, let's start with code. A DevOps pipeline. A DevOps pipeline is generally divided into phases, and it's possible to start to bring more security into the pipeline methodology by automating security code scanners. In the pre-build phase, you can have a static analysis test. It's a test that he performs in a non-production environment, such as a pipeline, for example. And the SAST inspects the application for coding failures, backdoors and malwares. Some of the tools are languages specific, such as the Golang lint, but SonarQube, both the four ones are open source tools. SonarQube is able to check more than 20 languages. So when you are searching for SAST, you have to search for one that checks your code, Ruby or Python or whatever you are coding these days, and check if the language that you are using it's covered by the tools, as I said, SonarQube is a good options. In the pre-build stage, you can also scan the dependencies. It's a matter of inventorying of dependence of binaries and executables, and ensuring that these dependencies are okay, over which you have no control. It's more common nowadays to have open source code introduced into your own code, so you have to check the binaries and the libraries and all the dependencies that you are using, checking for malicious code. A market standard, of course, is the OWASP dependency check, but you have more options out there. Snyk, it's a great company, and I am feeling that they are going open source, but I am not sure and I cannot confirm. And after the deploy, you can have dynamic application security test, a DAST. Different from the static test, it consists of tests performed during execution, monitoring things such as system memory, functional behavior, response time, and system performance overall. This test is similar to analysis that an attacker would do to try to gain improper access to your application. And a good example are the OWASP, ZASP, and Nikit Web vulnerability scanner, and of course the Metaexploit as well. There are many more modern tools that you can use in your pipeline, such as YAST, interactive application security tests, and RASP, real-time application security protection, kind of next generation web application file. But baby steps, right? This is the start of your DevSecOps journey. So try to include SaaS and DAST into your pipeline, and in no time you'll be looking for other tooling. Okay, what else? Okay, I like to treat as code, but it's not. It's your CI/CD platform such as GitLab, GitHub, Azure, and etc. For many organizations, they are the cornerstones of their DevOps strategy, and securing these tools is as essential as securing the code that is hosted on it. It's also a great starting point to adopt the secure strategy of ownership, shared ownership with developers, as they are the primary user of these platforms. Together, you can create the story of the platform users and map how the different ways that they could abuse the tool and plan actions to minimize these risks. Then you can include these actions into the roadmap, creating issues, and this is a good starting point both to the developers as the InfoSec pros as well. And remember that even if your platform, your repository is a SaaS, the provider is only responsible for the security of the environment. The configuration of your instance is still up to you. Both GitLab and GitHub, they have a security center with detailed documentation. Be sure to check them. Okay, back to the 4Cs, code. As part of the code, your CI/CD platform. What's next? Container. Okay. The DevOps environment and the concept of containerizations are such important steps to improve the efficiency of application delivery and deployment. Containers are powerful security tools if well used, as they allow the creation of image standards to be used. Although many images are available out there, it has become a security cliche to ask for moderation in its use. Ideally, your team should create their own images, following safety recommendations. Okay, you can have a series of steps to follow. I will not go into details right now because I'd like to recommend you to check the Docker bench for security. It's a document created by the Center for Internet Security, CIS, and it's a reference document designed to establish a baseline for how to secure your Docker. Recently, Snyk has announced its partnership with Docker, allowing users to check their image, and it will be a great option as well. But back to the Center for Internet Security document, you can use the Docker bench for security script to check if your Docker image is following all the guidelines set in the document. Another option is Claire, the open source project for static analysis of vulnerabilities in Docker containers. So a very fast revision, you have the Docker the Docker Center for Internet Security document, and you have the Docker Bench for Security script. And if you want another open source tool, you have Claire. Of course, there is a large number of options. This is the more simple for you to start. Okay, cluster, mainly Kubernetes. Your cluster Kubernetes will be as safe as the cloud where it runs, and also as the container and the code included on it. The Kubernetes security documentation lists important settings such as controlling access to the Kubernetes and its API, and allows you to make restrictions by users and networks. And controlling, for example, other capabilities such as workloads or user runtimes, and such as memory use to prevent attack. The Center for International Security also has a document about Kubernetes security. Likewise, is a document designed to establish a security configuration baseline for Kubernetes, and you can check the document, of course. And if you want to test Kubernetes security against this required list, you can use KubeBench to automate this test inside your pipeline, and you can use also KubeHunter. KubeHunter, it's a kind of penetration test. Both are developed by Aqua, and Aqua has a large amount of documentation that it's I really recommend Aqua's website. This is not a propaganda, but I learn a lot with them. So, okay, for Kubernetes, be sure to check the documentation and about how to secure and how to restrict access to your cluster, and also try to use KubeBench and KubeHunter. Of course, there is a large amount of tools out there, but if you want to start, I highly recommend KubeBench and KubeHunter. And finally, we have the Last C, cloud. The main message about cloud is that you also the concept of shared responsibility. This is something that I took from Amazon website, and I'm sure Google has something similar because the policies are almost the same. Security is the cloud is similar to security in your on-premise data centers. Only without the cost of maintaining facilities and hardware. In the cloud, you don't have to manage physical services or storage devices. Instead, you use software-based security tools to monitor and protect the flow of information to and out of your cloud resource. For this reason, cloud security is a shared responsibility between the customer and AWS, where customers are responsible for security in the cloud, and AWS is responsible for security of the cloud. So it's the same for your GitLab or GitHub instance. You still are responsible to configure the restrictions and all the security sets needs to make your data secure. And of course, be sure to check the security center of your cloud provider. AWS Cloud Security has a large amount of documentation and many free trainings. The same goes to Google Cloud and Azure. And if you want to use open source tools to secure your environment, you have again Aqua's Cloud Exploit, and Aqua's Cloud Exploit is available. You can use it to check both Azure, AWS, and of course Google as well. And in a different way for site securities, specific for Google Cloud. For Google Cloud. And one of the tools that I really like is the Security Monkey. Netflix Technology is famous for the series of tools that they make open and available, such as their security, the Chaos Monkey, and they have now the Security Monkey as well. And you have Scout too. Okay, conclusion. This was not one of the best of my talks, and I really apologize, guys. Okay, so now we have the basics to dig into more details about this new fascinating field. I know it was a lot to process and it's a lot to learn, but here it is a little to-do list of your next steps into your DevSecOps journey. First, let's revise what is DevSecOps, following Guy concept of DevSecOps 3 phases. DevSecOps is to introduce security into DevOps culture, to secure DevOps methodologies, and of course, to secure DevOps technologies as well. If you are ops or sec professional, try to get on board with the program, learn how to code, learn how to use Git, and see your code, your configuration as code. This will be your start of security as code, but remember, automation is just one of the part of DevSecOps. You have to change your mindset as well. For devs, I highly recommend you to learn about security development practices. There is a large amount of documentation about this on the internet, and your InfoSec Pro is available to help you. Remember about the concept of shift left, that is to include security checks into your pipeline to empower your dev and ops professionals to take security measures. And in all the DevOps methodologies and tools that you have to care about. Concentrate yourself into the 4 C's: code, container, closed, and cloud. I have included as well in CI/CD because I see it as a part of your code platform. And this is a nice assessment for you to do, is GitLab's DevSecOps test to check how mature is your DevSecOps strategy. And it's also a good, how can I say that? A good step-by-step of what to do. Be sure to review this DevSecOps plan constantly. And if you keep an eye on my Twitter, I will be sure to share more DevSecOps resource to help you out. I believe this pretty much concludes my talk, and I hope you guys have enjoyed your time with me as much as I did. Thank you for sharing your time with me, of course, and perhaps we could start our Q&A session right now.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much, Michelle. And we actually have Michelle here. So welcome, Michelle. Thank you very, very much for your session. We've got some good questions coming in the chat. Wow, it's flying through now. Okay, cool. So we're late, but we're going to have 5 minutes for questions. So Michelle, thank you very much for your session. Really enjoyed it, and welcome to DevSecOps 2024. So first question from Hamad. Have you had resistance with DevOps people when talking of security with DevOps? I always kind of wonder how different teams take the this shared responsibility, how well they want to take that from a dev point of view. How have you found that?
Well, there is two main points, two standpoints of view to take this question. First, you have to consider that security doesn't bring money to the business. So for DevOps, for business decision makers, they don't take security as something crucial to the work. But when security fails, you can lose a lot of money. So this is something that InfoSec pros have to bring on board. How much are you going to lose if something happens? So this is the first thing, that because most of the time developers are concerned about making change, bringing more money, bring more features to the software, and not taking care of security. So of course they have some how do you say, some resistance to it, because it's not part of the innovation that they are taking care so much. So we have to make their job very smooth and bring them on board to this kind of concerns. So this is why I talk about the repository as a first step into the share ownership, because this is something fun to take care. They know how to use and they know how to abuse it. So this is something that you bring them on board.
And really interesting question coming in from Manu, asking, in your experience, which of the 4 C's would you is generally more vulnerable? So if I jump back to the slide, lucky because this is recorded, I can actually just jump back to this slide here. So of the 4 C's, we have code, CI/CD, cluster, and cloud. How would you prioritize that in terms of which, if you had limited time, which would you kind of like really prioritize as the areas that you most need to focus on?
Yeah, this is something to be very careful, because as you say on the slide, each of the C's is so secure as the other one. So your code is so secure as your container, and your container is so secure as your Kubernetes. But I think the most important thing is cloud, because this is something that people doesn't take care. They really doesn't bother, because in the mind of most of the managers, and developers, okay, you're going to NoOps strategy, and my code and all my infrastructure is on the cloud, so I don't have to take care about this. But this is not true. Again, the cloud is something that we have to have the mindset of shared responsibility. So you have your responsibilities about the cloud as well. So in my view, would be the cloud. I'm not sure,
cool.
but
yeah, and I guess
it pretty much depends on a lot of points. It's difficult to say, oh, be careful just about your cloud, but be more careful about your cloud.
Yeah, and I guess it also, depending on the architecture that you use, if you're using maybe like a Lambda function style architecture versus more of a monolith style architecture, the responsibility is more heavily weighted towards you versus the cloud vendor as well, right? So there's differences there as well. One last question we can take from Seco Flods. Can it be enough to use can it be enough to just use open source tools to secure CI/CD, even though that in case of a breach, you'll probably lose money and reputation?
Well, if you look at the support terms of companies that you're paying, they're commercial, they have a limited responsibility as well. So of course you have support, and if you are not, if you don't feel comfortable enough to support your own infrastructure, your own develop your own pipeline, please go to a commercial one. But if you feel secure enough to take care of your own infrastructure, I don't see that there is a lot of difference in talking about money, because when something happens to your infrastructure, there is in the cloud, for example, there is a limited responsibility that the company that supports you can take. So this is something for your business to consider. Are you going to gain more or lose more of using open source? I really like open source tools because of, as the previous speaker said, you are on the edge of every innovation, because most of the companies, they bring open source solutions to the commercial ones. So this is something that if you want to be on edge, go to open source. But if you don't feel comfortable enough, there is a lot of good companies, commercial companies, that can support you.
And of course, there's also like a mix as well, right? So for example,
sure,
many vendors will have, like you mentioned SNCC, for example, many vendors will, like SNCC, will have a freemium offering, as well as kind of like an enterprise offering. So there's a balance there as well. Plus, you're not always limited to just one tool, so you can use a number if you choose different areas in the pipeline. Michelle, it's been a pleasure. It's been really great chatting with you. Thank you very, very much for your session. I appreciate you supporting DevSecOps.